So, friends, we will be talking today about changing our lives and the healing of the soul in that process. This month, we would like to begin our conversation by reflecting on some wise words from Mahatma Gandhi, where he stated that if you really want to change the world, it is best that we start with ourselves. Humanity, when you think about it, looks inwardly and seeks to connect with nature and with its surroundings. And we look at the world around us with a longing for the meaning of life. And through that process, of course, it causes some pain and suffering and some joys as well. And that is why the words from Mahatma Gandhi are very prudent in this moment, because in each of those connections, in each change that we want to have in ourselves, it is good to have the starting point of that be changing ourselves, because that's the only thing we actually have some amount of control over. And so you may ask the question, why would we want to change ourselves? Well, friends, because for most of us on this call, we would assume are aware of the fact that we are separated. There is an awareness that our current state of consciousness, our current state of life, leads us to a separateness from the universal, from the one, from the heart of the world. And instinctively, we would like to return to that oneness. We desire to be healed. In the spiritual school, we regard healing as that process that brings us together with the divine idea, to the unity that was the beginning of every life, and to integrate ourselves back to the original current life wave by transforming our current consciousness into a very new unity with the all manifestation. So that is how we would define healing, that connectedness. And then we could ask ourselves then, how do we change? What would drive us to that change? We could have some inspiration from words from The Voice of the Silence by H.P. Blavatsky, where she said, when one ceases to hear the noise of the many, the noises surrounding around us, we may discern the one. That inner sound coming from the one has the ability to quieten the outer sound. And therefore, those voices are in our hearts. Those voices are in our heads. Those voices are in our sensory aspects. If we take the time in each day to quiet those, then we would have room for that inner voice to speak in us, to direct us, to give us a vision that we can have a choice if we want to follow that vision or not. And so the advice continues that before a soul can see, there must be some amount of harmony within that must be attained. Attaining that inner harmony, dear friends, in the presence of this inner voice, would give us the possibility of reconnecting to the present and the different planes of our lives, and therefore to show us our human destiny. One could ask the question, what actually is changing in us? As a human being, it's good to define who we are. The human being today consists of 4 aspects of our personality, you could say: our physical, our etheric, our astral, and our mental body, several sensory faculties, several glands, hormones, our natural soul, which is composed of 5 aspects, and all of these vitalizes our whole being. These 5 soul fluids interpenetrate and animate those 4 personality vehicles we just talked about. So when we focus so much on ourselves, on our immediate surroundings, and we forget the greater whole, we often find ourselves out of balance. We then go out into nature. We then take a vacation trip of some sort. We then try to readjust our space, our time, in an attempt to have some measure of connectivity because there is something missing in us, or we think we feel something missing in us. So all of these attempts, of course, would bring some potential temporary relief. But there is still a deep longing, a calling in us, which is reminding us of our destiny. There is an inner sun that radiates in us and that asks for our cooperation. When we can silence the voices, the stimuli outside of us, then there is the possibility for that inner voice to be heard and for that inner voice to direct us. So, friends, we would like at this junction to talk a little bit about the phases in our lives, the change in us from a natural soul being into a soul being that breathes in a new reality from a different plane of life, and that starts to manifest itself. Those that came before us used certain words to describe this. In the voice of the silence, you would hear about the hall of ignorance as the first step. From that hall of ignorance, you go into the hall of learning as the second step. And from the hall of learning, you go into the hall of wisdom as the last step. So here, a soul starts a journey out of ignorance of that oneness, of that separateness. And in that journey, we make choices. We are placed on the fork of the road very often to make the choices we need to make in terms of transformation, in terms of reconnectivity with the oneness, in terms of healing. We make the choice of what type of environment we are going to have, where we would create an environment that is conducive for the inner voice and to experience that, to feel it in ourselves. We would have a choice to have the courage, to have the tenacity when confronted with our transient state, to be true to ourselves and yet to welcome a new beginning. We would be given a choice that the truth varies, that the truth of today is transient, that all that is asked of us is to be open for life, for what life brings to us, open for a greater truth tomorrow, open for a wholesomeness. And when we are able to do so, we are able to leave the hall of ignorance and enter into the hall of learning. And in that hall of learning, that hall of choices, then our soul being discovers that the nature-born soul, which helped us as a candidate up to this point, must yield to a greater power, a greater possibility, And by losing the grasp of their power, that is the power of the natural soul, they will gain a whole new world. And in this process, there will be, of course, many illusions. But if we remain steadfast in our inner pursuit, victory is at hand. Victory is there at the grasp. So when the soul starts to let go, a new soul principle is born in us and starts to guide our being. It is this new soul that heals. It starts to bring about a change of orientation and of consciousness. It starts to ensure that instead of the outward looking that we are, we can look within ourselves. We can truly understand the road ahead because our being, our state of being changes. The more the nature soul lets go of its grip, the more we are ensouled with new potential, which brings in new inner powers and strength. And an inner harmony starts to be felt. And when, friends, we are able to navigate through these junctions in our lives, we are then able to enter the hall of wisdom. And just like Krishna and the Prince Arjuna on a carriage, there is a dialogue that is happening in the battle of our lives. And we start by abandoning our separateness and our individuality in the way we perceive things and the way we are in terms of our state of being. We start having the wisdom to live not in the composite of things, but in the wholeness of life. Then our soul starts the journey of healing, of wholesomeness, of connecting with the various planes of life that are not from our ordinary life, and from it to manifest the new reality in our now, in our present state. Then the soul starts to perceive a new reality and mature in that journey in that way. Along this journey, our life changes and we are healed along that path by a soul that has connected itself to that which was in the beginning and has always been there, waiting for the right time to manifest itself, waiting for the right vehicles to manifest itself. Then, by changing ourselves, we are in fact changing the world. By changing ourselves, we are in fact bringing to the world a new perspective, a new unity. And so a healed soul being sees the world as a unity. Though there is the multitude of things in front of them, their essence is connected to the same source of life. The outer manifestation may differ, but their essence is the same. They go about life vibrating from a new light, which is in the center of their being, and as such, celebrate the birth of the light in their being and also help to bring more light into darkness, more truth into ignorance. And they do so by their very being. They radiate it because that is who they are. And so, in conclusion, friends, for this presentation, we would state that the divine sun, the sun that radiates all the 7 regions of the world, shines in their heart and then in their various bodies, so in their various vehicles, in their various organs, their various sensory faculties, and all that changes. And then that candidate can be of service to the world because they have a healed soul. They have connected to the oneness of life.